Hey guys, this is Lala Legacy and welcome back to another episode of 1000 Lies. So before we jump in, if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button because that would mean the whole world to me, and after this video if you like to hit the like button too. Alright, let's get into this. She, surprised, is only able to mutter the same question over and over again. Didn't you hear me, Sierre? I wanted to give you this before graduation is over. That's why I went home earlier and... Don't ignore me! This is important! My hands paused the moment I opened the folder that I'd brought along. A few seconds later, I take out the papers that contain the final chapter and hand them to Lucy. I heard you, but you're wrong. It's not a diary. I won't deny that my own experiences are reflected in my writing, much like any other writer. But you're wrong. Lucy can't even close her mouth. She's unable to accept what her ears are hearing. It can't be. It definitely fits. That accident, what happened to you, everything. Now that I've read the other story, I was sure that... I have a good idea of who showed you that old story, but the history behind it is something that only I know, something I keep to myself. We made a bet over this, didn't we? You know that I never lie when it comes to bets and promises. I'm telling you the truth. She takes a step backward, shaking her head in disbelief. Also, you say that each ending is a new beginning? If you believe that every ending sparks a new beginning, you're wrong. Life is made up of possibilities. For each decision you make, you open one door, but close 10 others. The consequences of our actions are always predetermined. There's no turning back. You can't travel backward in time. Each beginning is actually the ending of another story that will never see the light of day. This one here is simply another closed door. Do you understand me, Lucy? We look at each other with resolve. This may be the first time that we could see the truth reflected in each other's eyes, when we don't need to say anything more to understand each other's feelings. She snatches the papers from my hands with disdain. Unlike in the past, this time she doesn't even take a peek at it. What's wrong, Sierre? Where's that attitude coming from? I've always been direct and concise. I don't know what you mean. Lucy crosses her arms. No, not like this. There are no more words. It's not like anything we could say would change anything. Once I finish what I came here to do, I turn back to the exit. She remains there looking out the window. Even though I turn to look at her one last time, I'm unable to read the expression on her face. The doors of the school close behind me. Night comes and the sun is lost in its nadir. The few remaining students leave. They've rented out a club, so the night will be long. I, of course, won't be going with them. I never intended to go anyways, and where I belong is somewhere else. A place that's always been waiting for me. The park where I can always calm down. In the center, a quiet pond languishes as it's watched by the beautiful silhouette of a small woman. How appropriate it is that when she turns around, her face is illuminated by the moonlight. She's not wearing her hat. She doesn't need it under this bright night sky. There's no reason to hide. Her hair shimmers with a silver glow. Her porcelain skin sparkles amidst the darkness. This scene feels comparable to finding a fairy at a lake, one that could fulfill any wish and make any dream come true. But all I need is a smile that she always dedicates to me and only me. You came, Sierre? I have to fulfill my promises, and I couldn't make you wait any longer. Not after so long. Her fingers play with the edges of her skirt while she softly nods to me. You've always been here, remembering everything, knowing it all. I only need to speak the truth. That's what you've insisted on so often. After doing it, I could see clearly. I had the answer in front of me. That's why I'm thankful to you, Claire. The palms of her hands clasped together as if she's praying or begging for a wish. Are you sure, Sierre? Can you be sincere? Will you be able to remember me? I get closer to her until there's almost no space between us. My feet dip into the wet ground and my hands shake nervously, but she calms me down by holding my hands with her own. I won't be able to forget you if you're by my side. That's why. Without letting her hands go, I drop to one knee. It's crazy, but it's the conclusion I came to. No more doubts, no more trembling voice, no more questioning any of my actions. After all, to her, the most important thing is for me to be truthful. Claire, will you marry me? Under the moonlight, my feelings take the most appropriate form, that of a fairy tale. The book closes at the foot of the pond, creating a perfect world. Our own fantasy world, giving us the best possible ending to this story. That's not the end, though. Reaching the sun. Epilogue. The sun, or the moon. He managed to escape from the other animals. He managed to bear the coldest blizzard and find a safe place to spend the night. He managed to put up with the lack of air, fatigue, and disillusion. Close to the summit, he slipped on rocks, and the wound on his leg became worse. So much as leaning on it caused him intense pain, but that couldn't stop him either. The ground seemed to disappear in front of his eyes. Is that the summit? His motivation to reach his goal kept him going. More than climbing, it's like he was dragging his body along pathetically, but also pridefully for having overcome his limits. Only a few feet remained. Those feet would become inches, and those inches millimeters, until there was nothing left to climb. Exhausted, the wolf let his body lying on the top of the huge mountain. He was now able to lick the snow with his tongue, giving him a taste of victory at the moment. The storm died down, and the first rays of light slipped through the clouds. In front of him was the most beautiful landscape he would ever see. With his own eyes, he saw everywhere he'd passed. It was almost as if he could draw the route he'd taken to get here. He was full of satisfaction for having gone further than any other normal wolf, even despite his condition. But he didn't reach the sun. It was the same as always, high up, far away, distant. The summit of the mountain was cold and disrespectful, arrogant and haughty, fake. The wolf knew it wasn't his place. He couldn't reach the sun. He never had a chance to reach it in the first place. His soul left his body at that instant. His eyelids fell closed, taking his entire body and consciousness along with him. The snow couldn't hold its weight, or his weight, and started to drag him down the mountain. At first, it was with finesse and decorum, but with haste and exuberance. Finally, it was with fury and violence. The wolf went down without any resistance. His soul should have died a long time ago. What happened to his body now didn't concern him. Surrounded by the pure white snow, everything went black. Darkness engulfed him even after he woke up. His eyes opened, but there was nothing nor anyone left to see. He was trapped in the darkness, but he didn't mind it that much. He started walking, following his instincts as well as his legs would allow. Eventually, a small reflection caught his attention. He followed that reflection, assuming that he was already dead. Little by little it grew. After a minute of walking, he realized that the reflection was slipping through the trees around him. And at the same time, it became stronger where the woods seemed to end. The shine was both familiar and beautiful. As he got closer to it, he stopped following it by intuition and followed it by necessity. As soon as he exited the woods, he had to close his eyes due to the brightness. When he managed to open them again, he couldn't believe his eyes. It was the moon. The moon was waiting for him. Not from the skies as usual, but from the ground. Around him. It was close to him, next to him. The moon that had helped him in the past had rescued his soul. She never asked for anything in return. He had never looked for or wanted her. Yet she would never hurt him. And now they were face to face. Having someone who cares about you, who loves you unconditionally, No questions or doubts, they're simply there for you. Isn't that true happiness? The wolf lay down next to the moon, tired from his long journey and satisfied with what he'd achieved. At last he could rest in peace. He took one last breath, barely able to raise his head, and a whisper escaped from his mouth, one of profound gratitude. So foretold the tales that once upon a time there was a wolf without a past or memory who wanted to reach the sun, and found the moon in its place. That's it? No. Okay. What are you still doing here? The song's over. There's nothing left to hear. What did you say? You weren't convinced by that ending? Well, that's to be expected. It's hard to differentiate the truth from the many lies. However, there are lessons if you learn, or to learn if you analyze the story properly. The first, for instance, is that endings don't exist. And the rest? Well, it's better if you find them yourself. After all, behind 1,000 lies, there's always one hidden truth! What? Alright, let's go! Let's do it! The man slides his fingers across the piano's fallboard, nostalgic of the days when he would come here every day to practice. Those memories became the thin dust sitting inside the instrument. He knows that it'll fall down again once he leaves. The instrument isn't even tuned. Even if he could tune it, music only takes form at the moment that it's played. It's impossible to repeat the same melody as before. But he's not sad. He won't weep for it. On the contrary, he's happy to be able to relive these moments. Even if he's no longer here. You came here for answers, didn't you? Well, to be precise, we came here to give you answers. Let's go somewhere more comfortable first, to the library. Nowhere else could be more appropriate than the place that it all started. Or that started it all. It's a bit contradictory. But isn't this what every kid dreams of? Starring in their own adventure? The truth is that there's a trick to it. Being the protagonist and being a suitable protagonist are two different things. Humans are selfish. The pursuit of happiness has always been limited by us seeking out ways to improve ourselves. Of course, it's hard to figure out which is better and which is worse in this case. For starters, we depend on the things around us to define our identities. It's easier to see ourselves reflected in a mirror than to look into and try to understand our inner selves. If you believe that it's possible to look into oneself without referencing the world around you, I think you're wrong, because that's simply impossible. That's why we lie. Why he lies. It's the best way to bring out the reflection of our profile and ignore all of the flaws we have in the process. Whether or not it's considered a lie depends on what we believe and know, not our level of ignorance. Someone who lies without any knowledge of the subject they're lying about isn't a liar, they're ignorant. Do you understand now what I mean when I talk about the biggest liar of them all? Exactly. The biggest liar is the one who doesn't believe anything. Everything in this life stems from decisions which then become actions, and finally, they force consequences on you that will bring forth new decisions. But in the end, no one can define the value of those consequences. No one knows what the best course of action is. If we look at it that way, the circle of life takes on a new meaning. We first think, then lie, and finally, we create deceit to encourage ourselves to continue with our unequivocally mistaken thoughts. We don't have any control over our lives, or decisions. All we have is the ability to deceive ourselves, to adapt to a newly perceived reality that suits our tastes best. We create a hyper-reality. But curiously, if we continue to act while knowing that we're being deceived, the biggest liar, paradoxically, becomes the most sincere person out of out of everyone. What causes someone to lie if there's no purpose behind it? What does that person carry on despite the risks and their fears of their own existence? That's the biggest truth in this world. The unique and most authentic thing we can know about someone or even ourselves is hidden behind 1,000 lies. And that's hope. The moment someone like that lies, they consciously know that their actions lack any sense of purpose, much like their own identity. In that very instant, we're assured that the big liar has some sort of hope within them. Because maybe, just maybe, the consequences of our actions might not lead to deceit. Maybe even if it's just by chance. Even if it's just an approximation of the correct direction. Or that's what he believes. Do you now understand how someone could end up being afraid of becoming the main character of their adventure? No, of course not. That's a tough pill to swallow. It's easier to understand if you see it with your own eyes. With that being said, a group of 3 takes a seat by a large window, unsure of where to start. There's no better place to start than at the beginning from the past, from their memories. It's a bit embarrassing, but yeah, it was here. I used to sit right here, motionless, with my eyes fixated on the books and from time to time on the counter. It's normal. I was curious and no one else was here. It was the kind of silence that made hours seem like they dragged on forever. Considering how I was so shy and silent and timid, well... Ziva scratches her cheek with a finger. The charismatic girl stands at a crossroad when it comes to her past. She's getting caught up in her past self again. The novice pianist, standing next to her, maybe still too similar to his older self, decides to take the reins once he's the most calm and composed in the room. You probably already know this, but the complex was part of a bigger plan. An urban expansion that was put on hold for budget issues, and this cultural center went without ever being used. Since most of the materials were purchased ahead of schedule, volunteers took the opportunity to use this place for a while. It became a place that was especially useful for taking art and music lessons. I was one of the kids that came here to take classes. While waiting for my parents to get off work and pick me up, I would waste my time in this library. The 3 of us would always meet up here. Even though we went to the same school, we weren't the type of people that had many friends, and we didn't know each other very well because we were from different classes. My parents, like Sierrans, were volunteers here. Since I was their only child, they would take me along with them. In his case, since he was older than us and their workforce was lacking, he was given the position of librarian. There wasn't much for him to do since there were never any visitors. He spent more time complaining and huffing than anything else. In that sense, I guess nothing has changed. It got to the point that I was the only close friend he had, so he would vent all of his complaints to me, even if I never said a word to him. Little by little, he started dragging me around with him. Our discussions changed to planes and games. Time flew by so quickly each day. For some reason, he'd always come up with fake stories about his center, or about this center and himself. At first, I didn't really know what he was trying to accomplish, but now it's clear to me that it was simply a device he used to kill his boredom. Every time I came here, he was doing something. I was under the impression that librarians were supposed to keep the room silent, but in his case, it was the total opposite. It wasn't long after that until I joined the group. It was unexpected considering my attitude at the time. I wasn't the kind of extroverted person who was able to forge friendships easily. I, who had always been a polite and reliable kid, started to think that I was becoming a delinquent because we'd sometimes run away from the building, seeking out whatever adventure Sierra would come up with at that moment. We got in trouble sometimes, and I'd complain about it every time, but it was fun. Really fun. The 3 of us became inseparable. Sierran was basically our leader, even though I wouldn't admit it back then because I was too stubborn and prideful. There was never a dull moment. In that sense, lately, I think Sierra really is becoming more like his former self. Right now, he'll only get in trouble if there's a bet involved. It's like he needs justification so that no matter what happens, no one can condemn his actions. But I think that's changing too, or at least that's what I thought. I guess it isn't easy to leave the past behind. We've been talking about that long enough. I know you want to hear about the accident. But despite whatever you think, it's actually pretty simple. At the same time, though, it's incomprehensible if you don't hear it in the correct context. You've read what he wrote in his notebook at that time, right? The story of the three friends? By looking around you and knowing him, it's easy to assume that it was intended as a diary, a record of what had happened from his perspective. Although it wouldn't be too far-fetched to believe that there's one detail you have to keep in mind to see the full picture. You're probably right with whatever assumptions you make about it. The more childish and cheesy, the better. After all, we were just kids, and he still acts like one sometimes. All that about making a decision, about how the chains would allow more leeway if two people got closer and allow the third person to go farther, was his interpretation of a childhood love triangle. This is a bit, well, I'd rather not get into too much detail, but one day Sierran came to me and confessed, and I accepted, I guess. The truth is, we didn't really know what to do about it. We were inexperienced and really naive, even for our ages. It's not like I was the most proactive person in the world either. Our concept of a date was going to the arcade. Most of the time, we'd play whichever games we wanted separately. So it's so embarrassing that I die every time I think about it. They couldn't really be considered dates either, since I was there as well. Like I said, we were really naive. We never did anything beyond that. It was more like an experiment between the two of us. And that's exactly what Sierra was afraid of. In his own words, he thought he was incompetent. Ziva was timid, quiet, and inexpressive. He felt that he wasn't making enough of an effort to make her smile. On the other hand, we were kind of young to be worrying about that kind of thing. As our leader, he was losing the courage and imagination that had been dazzling us. And I was the last straw. I made him know that I felt detached from the group from the moment they decided to date each other. No, you're wrong. It was my fault. I always left everything to him. I never helped him. I always acted like I had a problem with everything we do. It was like I couldn't enjoy anything. I had this problem with expressing my emotions. It was difficult to get close to people and say how I really felt. In any case, the breakdown happened on the day of the accident, in this very building after the discussion he and I had in the music room. He felt guilty, and I didn't tell him he was wrong. Deep down, I was blinded by jealousy. I wanted to make him see something that I didn't even understand. I upset him so much that he ran in a direction he shouldn't have. I followed him to an unfinished area. We ignored the signs, even though he didn't want to confront me. I was determined otherwise. Then something went wrong. I honestly can't remember if the floor fell in or if someone stepped somewhere they shouldn't have. The noise it made could be heard from within the entire complex. It wasn't until sometime later that we could hear the siren of the ambulance. Up until now, as I mentioned, it wasn't that different from what you'd assumed. The lie is always where one least expects it. The cost of the accident and the bad taste it left in everyone's mouth caused all activity in the building to stop indefinitely. From his point of view, Sierran thought that he'd ruined everything, that he'd literally destroyed what kept us together. He killed the futures of many people he didn't even know, people who had hopes for that building. The worst part for him was that he didn't even have to face the consequences of his actions. Sierran went unscathed by the accident. He had nothing but a few scratches that only caused him to stay a single night in the hospital. From then on, everyone treated him like a victim of an incident rather than the cause of it. The next morning at the hospital, Sieran wondered why he was the only one who hadn't lost anything, despite being the one who'd always complained about that place and his librarian position. His head became filled with those kinds of thoughts, and eventually something in his mind completely snapped. He took a kitchen knife during breakfast and stabbed his right leg with all of his strength. He started near his ankle, and even though doing something like that would make anyone else scream, he kept slicing at his leg in silence, slowly cutting upwards while his blood continued to pour out. Soon, the sheets and the floor were covered in blood, but he still kept carefully cutting. He had already reached his knee by the time his mother came to check on him for the day. She ran to her son and asked what he was doing, what was happening. And he, totally composed with the knife still in his hand, tilted his head in confusion and gave her a natural response. "What do you mean, Mom? I got this wound from the accident. That's why I'm hospitalized. Right?" A long silence fills the room, as if they had been expecting the story to have a completely different ending. But it doesn't. As if the responsibility is on his shoulders because he told the story, Deniz tries to keep the conversation alive. After that, as you probably guessed, Seer's leg healed. However, his heart and mind, not so much. Anything to do with us or any situation where he has to deal with the expectations of other people causes extreme pain to surge through the wound on his right leg. It took an entire year for him to return to his normal life, but the consequences of that accident still remain. From that moment forward, we didn't get the chance to speak with him again. He transferred schools to avoid seeing us, and even though Ziva's tried really hard to heal him in every possible way, she was ultimately unsuccessful. At least until this past year, he seemed to be steadily improving, so Ziva transferred schools in a last-ditch effort to recover our lost contact. "I changed my appearance, adopted a new unbelievable personality and quirks so as not to remind him of the past. I even avoided calling him by his first name in an attempt to not to remind him of what we were. And even that way, there were tons of times during class where he'd leave because it was impossible for him to be near me. I don't know if it worked. I honestly believed that I was helping. Even if they were only small steps, that was the impression I had." In that sense, it probably looks like the story ended the same way, with Sieran alone, unable to face his friends. But that isn't actually the case. It's not like he disappeared into thin air. Thin air this time, and more importantly, the chains, the bond that kept the three of us together, never broke. As you probably already know, Sieran has an odd way of thinking. He doesn't write after, but before events happen. It seems like clairvoyance, but most likely it's what he hopes will happen. Since the beginning, he's wanted to break the chains, return everything to as it was before, as if nothing had ever happened, as if he'd never existed in the first place. He had planned to stay alone forever. He wanted to lose us, to escape us, because from his point of view, he was guilty of everything that had happened. That was his version of a happy ending. Now everything makes sense, doesn't it? He doesn't want to win or lose. His priority has always been others. His health depends on how everyone around him feels and acts. Having finished recounting the past, Deniz offers to answer any questions. Since there's nothing left to say, they finish their improvised meeting and pack up their belongings. It's then, looking at the perfect alienated books on the shelf, that Deniz finds the most appropriate words to describe an idea that he couldn't give shape to until now. His notebook, his tales, his stories. They weren't based on a true story, but on a story that should be true. It's well into the late hours of the night when the man engrossed by his computer suddenly receives a phone call. He's surprised. It's been a long time since he's heard that sound, at least during these ungodly hours. The number displayed on the screen is listed as unknown. It makes him stagger for a moment before he slides a finger against the OLED screen and brings the phone closer to his ear. Hello? He can hear nervous breathing on the other end. Whoever it is, they're silent. If you have nothing to say, then I'm hanging up, whoever you are. Don't be such a schmuck, Sierra. I just wasn't sure if it was you. After all, you supposedly don't have a cell phone. He pulls the phone away from his ear the moment he hears the voice on the other end. Immediately, he wonders how she managed to get his phone number. Although he can think of several possibilities, there's no use in thinking about it. I'm still waiting, Sierra. The voice seemed to be dripping out of the speakers, dissolving into the air. My birthday was yesterday. We were all supposed to celebrate it together, and you were supposed to bring me the best present on earth. Did you forget? Sierra instinctively lowers his head. He didn't forget about any of that, but they're already neglected memories to him. Congratulations, Lucy, but I'm sorry. The woman's voice becomes irritated and her verbiage quickens. You're sorry? What are you saying? It's as if the apologies of a pathological liar have any value. In any case, it's not too late yet. I was technically born early in the morning, so you still have time for redemption before my birthday ends. I thought I made myself clear, Lucy. I don't... Clear? What should be clear, I wonder? That's what I want from you. I want you to tell me the truth without beating around the bush. Do you think I'm stupid or what? The best present you could ever give me is to be clear for once. The sarcastic tone she uses to express herself forces a displeased look on Sierran's face. He knows that it's impossible to defeat her in terms of pig-headedness. However, that's not enough. Not when he has already made his decision. Not when he no longer cares about making good or bad impressions of himself. Is it that hard to do what's right for once? I want to know the truth as you see it, not from their point of view, not the conclusion I came to from their words, but your truth. Don't you think it's only fair after everything that's happened? Fair. Yes, with her, justice has always been present. It was the leitmotif of their relationship, the scale that would justify their actions. That might have been the reason that something changed in Sierran's heart. By chance or justification, even if it wasn't intentional, the wound refused to close by itself. But justice was never the real reason behind his actions. Not for him, nor anyone else. If I tell you the truth, will you be satisfied? I doubt it. I probably won't calm down either, but I want to know. Then I'll leave you alone if that's what you really want. The sound of his inhaling slips through the microphone. Give me a minute, please. Don't hang up. She doesn't understand what he's planning, but she agrees to it. Sierran carefully places his phone on the table, not turning it off nor ending the call. He sighs again and closes his eyes. He exhaustedly lets his body fall back on the chair and turns his head to look at the other side of the room. You heard it yourself. What do you think, Claire? The girl sitting on the edge of the bed seems unaffected. Her features are mostly obscured by the deep darkness of the night, only illuminated by the blue light emanating from the computer screens. It might be because she isn't wearing a hat, but her smile seems to be more mature than usual, and her answers flow with a flawless calm. If you're asking me, it's because you're hesitating. You'll keep hesitating until your curiosity is satiated, right? Do whatever you want, Sierra. Do what you have to do. I've already made my decision, Claire. That won't change no matter how curious I am. She shrugs at him with fatigue. You don't understand anything, do you? Sometimes you need to forget in order to be truthful. I've told you 1,000,000 times, haven't I? What's important to me? The truth isn't determined by a decision or justice. The only truth you can rely on is the strength that helped you make it this far. Strength? I wish. More like lack of strength. But it isn't a bad thing either, considering what I've managed to get out of it. Is that even close to what you really want? You always end up clinging to the past, Sierra, choosing to forget the past and what could have been, and deciding to walk another path is as mature as accepting your limits. Didn't you keep returning to that place despite the bad memories associated with it? Aren't you keeping that new notebook without tearing any of its pages out? From what I've seen, you'd always tear out any pages that didn't fit into your perfect world. Now, however, you keep the dedicatories of the people who don't fit into your ideal ending. A bit contradictory, don't you think? Don't take things out of context, Claire. I'm not hurting anyone by doing it. You're hurting yourself. I'm no different than anyone else. Everyone mourns their losses in their own ways. Nostalgia is a recurring theme in everyone's lives, not because the past is always better, but because of the possibilities that it once held. Doors don't close, and there isn't a path to follow when it comes to decisions, Sierra. Thinking that you've lost something is incorrect, because you didn't have anything to begin with. You keep clinging to your lies, writing on empty pages, and admiring the myriad of possibilities that evaporate as soon as you open your hand and expose them to the test of time. If you're still clinging to your notebook, if you can still read those first pages, it's because that door never really closed, no matter how many tricks you believe yourself to know. Despite her words, Claire lowers her head. She has always been contradictory, and that's something that Sierra can't bear to see. Then what do I do? Fight for another disappointment? Fall face down in front of destiny like an idiot even though I know myself and my limitations? You can simply stop writing. No matter what, I will always wait for you. No, Claire. Our relationship won't ever be the same if I do as you ask. I don't even want to take the risk in the first place because it won't change the result. I don't have control over it. She chuckles, sensing that the end is near. The terror, the fear of her own existence, what she may become without her consent. She doesn't have a definitive answer, at least not an appropriate one. Nevertheless, she finds something funny about it, something that makes her believe the situation at hand is childish. She stands up, gets closer to Sierra, caresses him lovingly, and speaks her heart's desires. Whatever you do, Sierra, whatever you've done, you will always belong to yourself. Go, leave the pen behind. Learn to improvise. The two of them embrace tightly, grasping one another. Even if you wish otherwise, your hands will be empty regardless, no matter how beautiful it may look to you. Moonlight is just a reflection of sunlight. Sorry, are you still there? Yeah, go on. Do you remember when you mentioned that one of your neighbors got a package? A package? The one you lost? Yeah, I remember. Get it from her. Consider it your present. Now? Do you know what time it is? You said we only have a few hours left, didn't you? Saren hangs up wordlessly, leaving Lucy to stare at her cell phone in disbelief. She has so many questions. What was all that about? Why does everything have to be weird? Especially earlier, as she waited for him on the phone. There was only silence. The doorbell rings. In front of the door, Lucy nervously taps her feet against the floor. She wonders how she's going to justify her visit at this late of an hour. Soon enough, the face of a drowsy and disheveled middle-aged woman appears on the other side of the door. The woman makes an odd sound that resembles an animal's call, and asks Lucy what she wants. I'm sorry for coming over this late, but it's urgent. I'm a resident from the front building. My name is Lucy. I don't know if you know me. We've met before, I think. The woman raises her head, her eyes unmistakably begging the girl to get to the point if she doesn't want to die here and now. My sister mentioned that you got a package by mistake or something. Is that true? Well, that package is actually for me, I think. No, I mean, it's for me, but You were gone for the holidays, and basically, I'll leave you alone if you give it to me. I know I should have saved this for another day, but it's urgent, I hope. For a moment, the woman doesn't react. Her first impulse is to slam the door shut in Lucy's face. But she controls herself, walks over to a nearby table and picks up a small package. She places it in her nighttime visitor's hands. You don't know how grateful I am. Don't hesitate to come to me if you ever need a favor. She doesn't finish her sentence before the woman slams the door closed. I'll take that as a no. Now, let's see. What am I supposed to do with this? With no other plan, she leaves the apartment building and walks several feet back to her own building and ascends to her floor. On the way up, she inspects the package, unsure whether or not she should open it. If she does open it, she wonders what the best way would be to not damage it. Once she's on the elevator, she starts carefully opening the cardboard box. The interior is full of old newspaper clippings. The elevator door opens. She walks out as she plunges her fingers inside the box, trying to find something among all of the filler. And finally, she discovers that it's empty. And no, that one doesn't have a false bottom like the one you gave me. Sieran appears, panting, near the top of the stairs. Little by little, he gets closer to an overwhelmed Lucy. Why is it empty? What is this? Wasn't this supposed to be yours and... Come on, Lucy, don't tell me that you believed it. That I secretly ordered something that it accidentally got sent to another neighborhood and that someone would suddenly start sending me anonymous threats? Didn't you want the truth? That is the best proof I can give you. It best explains the situation by itself. Sieran's body rests against the wall, clearly unable to handle the situation at hand. He avoids eye contact. When she starts putting everything together, she can't fully believe it. What are you saying? Why? What is all of this about? Isn't it obvious? A figurine or a statue, the means don't matter. In the end, the story is still the exact same. The important part is that we've met. Everything else was just an excuse I made up so that I could escape if I wanted to. Part of her feels frightened. The other part feels pity. Lucy doesn't know where she should look nor where to stand, but she summons the will to continue. What did you want to achieve? Why me? Why now? Couldn't you have used the normal method like a normal person? I tried, but I couldn't. My past was clinging to me. My fears and doubts were too big to not appear in the life of anyone else who got involved with me. What if I was wrong? What if something went wrong? Could I bear another blow like the one from 7 years ago? You don't know how important everything was to me, Lucy. You've never been aware of all the changes you brought simply by existing. The first time I saw you, the first time I saw you were at the beginning of the school year. It was a dark morning, and before going up the steps as usual, I saw you walking along them, and you stopped on the top. You gave me a look that I'll never forget. The sun was rising behind you, and even though its light was blinding me, I couldn't possibly look away. Most importantly, from that moment on, for the first time since the accident, I stopped feeling pain. I lied to you when I told you that my leg hurts all the time, Lucy. There's an exception, and that's when I'm with you. That time when I ran out of your apartment and away from the basketball game. I managed to do all of that because after looking at you, I forgot about the pain in my right leg. Since that first encounter, I was always anxiously waiting to see you the next morning. Even if it was something that only happened a few times, I knew that my day would change and I'd be able to do things that were impossible before. I would go to class tired because I couldn't sleep knowing there was a chance that I'd meet you again. I felt like I could do whatever I wanted to. I didn't have to make any excuses to do anything or feel guilty about it. That's why, because the school year was coming to a close, and knowing that I wouldn't be able to see you again afterward, I decided to take the risk and meet you. I wanted to know who you were, and then I'd be able to decide if you were really special or just a product of my imagination. But I'm gonna end it here. We'll probably finish this up in the next time. Maybe, depending on how long this part is. But if you liked it, hit that like button down below. Don't forget to subscribe. I love you guys so much, and I will see you next time. Bye!